Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill, may the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. And these days, of course, that has special meaning. We are studying Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. We have come to chapter 15, The Real and the Apparent Man, delivered in New York. It does not say when, but I'm assuming it was 1896, sometime in 1896. So before we begin, is there anything left over from last week when we did kind of an open forum on what the Swami had been talking about so far? Is there any, so to speak, old business, as they say in Robert's Rules of Order? Any old business that needs to be taken care of? All right. For those of us who like the science aspect of this, there's something very much to look forward to here in this talk, The Real and the Apparent Man. So if there's nothing from anyone, we shall begin. Here we stand, and our eyes look forward, sometimes miles ahead. Man has been doing that since he began to think. He is always looking forward, looking ahead. He wants to know where he goes, even after the dissolution of his body. Various theories have been propounded, system after system has been brought forward to suggest explanations. Some have been rejected, while others have been accepted, and this will go on so long as man is here, so long as man thinks. There is some truth in each of these systems. There is a good deal of what is not truth in all of them. I shall try to place before you the sum and substance, the result of the inquiries in this line that have been made in India. I shall try to harmonize the various thoughts on the subject as they have come up from time to time among Indian philosophers. I shall try to harmonize the psychologists and the metaphysicians, and if possible, I shall harmonize them with modern scientific thinking also. Therefore, the one theme of the Vedanta philosophy, is the search after unity. The Hindu mind does not care for the particular. It is always after the general, nay, the universal. I'm going to repeat that. It's so very important for us to understand because we're so immersed in a reductionist way of thinking here, the particulars. Now, of course, at the leading edge of science, this is being This way of thinking, this way of being, is being undermined. But it is here in the West, we have been married to this idea of finding the general from the particular. The Swami says, the Hindu mind does not care for the particular. It is always after the general, nay, the universal. What is that by which by knowing which everything else is also to be known? What is that by knowing which everything else is to be known? And of course, that can't be a particular generalized to the everything. It has to be the one universal principle from which everything else is derived, as he will tell us. What is that by knowing which everything else is to be known? When Sri Ramakrishna was asked by his older brother to study more so that he could earn more money for the family, Sri Ramakrishna said, I don't want a bread-winning education. I want to know that by which everything else is known. And that became the focus of his spiritual journey. As Mahatma Gandhi said of Sri Ramakrishna, if you want to know the Vedas, if you want to understand the Vedas, study the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He lived them. So this is where Vivekananda is speaking, from where he is speaking, from that great experience of Sri Ramakrishna as taught to him. What is that? By knowing which everything else is to be known. That is the one theme. As through the knowledge of one kind of clay, all that is of clay is known, so what is that by knowing which this whole universe will be known? That's a quote from one of the Upanishads. I don't remember which, maybe the Mandukya. Yeah, I think it is. As through the knowledge of one kind of clay, one lump of clay, as through the knowledge of one lump of clay, all that is of clay is known. So what is that by knowing which this whole universe itself will be known? That is the one search. Now contrast that with the way we do education here. Each PhD dissertation, each master's thesis is on some tiny little corner of the knowledge. And you're discouraged from generalizing too far. I'm not criticizing. I'm simply saying it's a very, very different way of thinking. But we here are very much immersed in it. And so we think that is the normal. And that's what the Swami is going to speak to us about. That is only one way of thinking. And for us to get to the real, behind the apparent, remember the title of this talk is The Real and the Apparent Man. We will get to know the real only by understanding in that greater sense, not building knowledge out of tiny little blocks. So that's probably a good place to pause to see if there are anything that you would like to say from your own experience. or any concern you'd like to raise or any question you'd like to ask. Anything at all about this moving from the particular to the general, that is the reductionist scientific way of being here in the West, or what the Swami is talking to us about, knowing that by which all else is known. Anything at all from anyone? All right. Apparently everyone is satisfied with how we've come so far. The whole of this universe, according to the Hindu philosophers, can be resolved into one material. Now, this is, we need to really ingest this next, assimilate this. The whole.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Sorry to interrupt. My unmute button was giving me trouble. So now I'm unmuted. I do have sort of like a comment for the previous question.
Yes,
I think
fine.
it is, it's more difficult for someone who is interested in this path at younger ages to actually make it happen, because a lot of parents and grandparents and family, they actually dissuade them from going or look down on. Like one of my friend's mother, they are very religious people, very nice and very successful, but they have this notion that those who join these religious organizations or orders go there because they get everything for free, that they don't have to work.
Yes.
So there's so much misperception. And if somebody graduates from one of these big institutions in India like IIT and choose to go to Ramakrishna Mission or Chinmaya Mission, they feel very sad and discourage them.
Yes. Well, I've heard this for many, many years. I once mentioned to a colleague of my late father-in-law, who was himself a PhD in political and economic philosophy. I mentioned to him that I was associated with a Ramakrishna Mission Center. And he went off like somebody pulled the cork from a champagne bottle about how these monks were just leeches and only wanted to take money from people so that they could support themselves without working. So I have heard exactly what you were talking about. And that fellow, of course, was Indian. He was a colleague of my father-in-law's at the university, but he was Indian by birth. And he had a real aversion to the monastics in general, but in particular the Ramakrishna order because of its success and the fact that it was constantly fundraising for disaster relief and famine relief and for village education and so on. But that isn't how he saw it. So I certainly understand what you're saying. And again, without criticism or judgment, it is a point of view that can be taken by people who may not understand fully. And of course, there may be some who wear the ochre cloth who do behave in that way. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swami. Anything else from anyone?
Yeah, I've certainly been in contact with people who claim to be religious who really are exploitive. I think there's something to what he said. However, we've met the monks of the Ramakrishna order, and they're very sincere. I can't see how anybody could say that after meeting these monks. I think it's possible. I've noticed that people kind of project themselves into the world, like if they're
yes.
Okay, you see where I'm going.
Oh yes, yes indeed.
I knew a person who was very criminally minded, and she always suspected others of being like stealing from her and so on and so forth.
Yes. Well, Goethe, ladies forgive the male pronoun, but that's the way they spoke in Goethe's day. A man sees in the world what he carries in his heart. And
Yeah.
So true.
That's what we see. That was Goethe's way of talking about projection. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Brahmadas.
So I think when someone says something like that, we should always consider the source.
Yes. All right. If we're all satisfied, the whole of this universe, according to the Hindu philosophers, can be resolved into one material. Notice the general. The particulars can be resolved into one material, which they call Akasha. Everything that we can see around us, feel, touch, taste, is simply a differentiated manifestation of this Akasha. This all-pervading fine. It is all-pervading fine. Everything we see around us, feel, touch, taste, is simply a differentiated manifestation of this Akasha. It is all-pervading fine, that is to say, subtle, not itself a material thing. We'll see how that works out. All that we call solids, liquids, or gases, figures, forms, or bodies, the earth, sun, moon, and stars, everything is composed of this Akasha. What force is it which acts upon this Akasha and manufactures this universe out of it? Along with Akasha exists universal power. One power, one source of all manifestation, one power to create all manifestation. Along with this Akasha exists universal power. All that is power in the universe, manifesting as force or attraction, nay, even as thought, is but a different manifestation of that one power which the Hindus call prana. And if you remember, in his earlier talks on the Atman, the Swami talked about the nature of thought. It is that some force exerts a blow on the mind and thereby stimulates one of the vasanas or samskaras, mental impressions that are in the mind, and this manifests as thought. So it is this prana, the name for this force in all its manifestations is prana. So I'll read that again. Along with Akasha exists universal power, and all that is power in the universe, manifesting as force or attraction, nay, even as thought, is but a different manifestation of that one power which the Hindus call prana. This prana, acting on Akasha, is creating the whole of this universe. Again, that might be a good place to stop, because now the Swami is going to pivot into how this actually occurs. And this is where those of us who are interested in science will find some very strong parallels with modern astrophysics. So anything about this Akasha or prana, anything at all, though, about these two general principles from which everything arises. So this is why, to the Hindu mind, the Swami is saying, the particular is not of very much interest. What is it that causes all of these particulars to arise? So the Swami has said, it is a material, a very fine material called Akasha, acted upon by this one universal power in all of its many subtle forms called prana. Anything at all about that wants to be resolved?
So, Brother Chakra, this Akasha seems to me to be everything that's in the physical world that we can see, touch, and taste. And this prana seems to be the energy or essence that we can't really see, touch, or taste, but we sense in other ways.
Yes.
Am I following that correctly?
Yes, indeed. And of course, modern science has broken these things down. We have electricity, we have gravity, we have this, that, and all of these particulars, these particles, that are part of modern quantum and particle physics. We keep looking deeper and deeper and deeper into the particulars. And now we're confounded by the fact that there seem to be two general principles that are called dark energy and dark matter for lack of any better terms. They're just clumsy approximations of some force, that dark energy is apparently an anti-gravity or repulsive force, and dark matter is a matter that does not seem to interact with anything else, so none of our things that measure the interactions among the particulars we see its effects, but we don't know at all what it is. So there's these clumsy terms: dark energy, dark matter. Dark being we can't shed any light on it. So that's, but you're right, Dennis, in the way you summarize that. But we in the West, we tend to study the particulars rather than the that from which all the particulars arise. Although, as I gestured to earlier, the modern quantum physicists and astrophysicists are having to confront these universal principles that confound and defy. For example, entanglement. Just to throw out a word that some of you may know, that an electron here and an electron 14 billion light years away, if one is spin up, the other will be spin up. If one is spin down, the other will be spin down. These are scientific terms. And there's no communication between them. So this one substance, one energy, seems to know itself at any distance, completely defying the rules of the general and special theories of relativity.
I do have one follow-up question. Since
Yes,
you've broken this down into two separate things, do they merge back together from one source at any time in space?
Yes, the Swami is getting there. The Swami is getting there.
Great.
The term from which they, the term about of which they, from that from which they emerge is called Mahat, the great cause. We'll get there, but you're just anticipating the Swami, yes. That these
I'll
both.
stand by.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Dennis?
I'll stand by. I'll keep listening.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, but there it is. So prana, acting on Akasha, is creating the whole of this universe. In other words, anything at all that we can interact with by our organs of sense and our organs of perception. So now he goes on to talk about a cycle. A cycle in the Hindu terms, in the Sanskrit terms, is a kalpa. There is the kalpa. One kalpa, a total kalpa, is composed of the day of Brahma, in which all of manifestation occurs, and the night of Brahma, in which all of manifestation is withdrawn and, in the terms of physics, exists in a state of absolute zero, no vibration. So that's what the Swami means by a cycle. In the beginning of a cycle, this prana, as it were, sleeps in the infinite ocean of Akasha. Prana is not active. It is, in the term he uses here, asleep in the infinite ocean of Akasha. It existed motionless in the beginning. Then arises motion in this ocean of Akasha by the action of this prana. Then arises motion in this ocean of Akasha by the action of this prana. And as this prana begins to move, to vibrate, all of manifestation, as Don Lincoln of Fermilab says, is nothing more than an interaction among infinite fields of vibration, quantum fields, he calls them. There is nothing out there but vibration. As this prana begins to move, to vibrate, out of this ocean come the various celestial systems, in other words, galaxies, suns, moons, stars, earth, the particulars now. Out of the general, out of this ocean, the various particulars come. This is anti-entropy. Now we have this complete entropy of prana asleep in Akasha, nothing, no motion, complete entropy, total absolute zero, no vibration. The various celestial systems, suns, moons, stars, earth. Notice the specialization, the increasing specialization. Earth, human beings, animals, plants, and the manifestations of the various forces and phenomena. Every manifestation of power, therefore, according to them, is this prana. Every material manifestation is Akasha. When the cycle will end, all that we call solid will melt away into the next form, the next finer or liquid form. That will melt into the gaseous, and that into finer and more uniform heat vibrations, and all will melt back into the original Akasha and what we now call attraction, repulsion, and motion will slowly resolve into the original prana. Then this prana is said to be asleep for a period. This is the night of Brahma. Then this prana is said to sleep for a period, again to emerge and throw out all those forms. And when this period will end, the whole thing will subside again. Thus, this process of creation is going down and coming up, oscillating backwards and forwards. In the language of modern science, it is becoming static during one period, and during another period is becoming dynamic. Those words may be more familiar to us in modern science: static, entropy, dynamic, anti-entropy. And at one time, it becomes potential. That's the static or entropic state. And the next period becomes active, the anti-entropic or dynamic state. This alteration has gone on through eternity. So now he's about to go on to what Dennis asked about. Is there something from which all this arises? But before we go on, is there anything that anyone would like to add from their own knowledge or experience, or any concern you'd like to raise that needs to be resolved, or any question you'd like to ask about what the Swami has said? I mean, these are mighty big statements that he's making. Roberto, no questions?
Actually, I have a lot to say, but I'm refraining myself because I would rather listen to the Swami's words.
Okay, Roberto. Well, I appreciate the courtesy and the thoughtfulness. And I'm sure there's a lot that you know that could be shared with us. Roberto knows a good deal about science. I don't know just exactly what his background is, but he probably knows more about this than certainly I know. But in any event, thank you, Roberto, for your consideration. You'll be very interested in what the Swami says next. Nothing else from anyone? Okay. This alteration between entropy and anti-entropy, the active and the dynamic, has gone on throughout eternity, through all eternity. Yet, this analysis is only partial. Again, he's speaking from the Sanatana Dharma, which is the proper term for Hinduism. He's from the findings and the teachings of those who originated Sanatana Dharma, which is in part the Vedas and the Upanishads. So here we go. Yet this analysis is only partial. This much has been known even to modern physical science. Beyond that, the research of physical science cannot reach. At his time, it could not. It is beginning, and I remind you, at his urging. He urged the Throop family in Pasadena in the years 1899 and 1900. They had something called the Throop Scientific Institute or Throop Institute of Science. I don't remember which. In any event, he very strongly encouraged them that they must go on, that what they were doing was very important, and there is a direct connection between that and the California Institute of Technology, which is now one of the premier research facilities in the sciences. So when the Swami says, beyond that, the research of physical science cannot reach. I said at the beginning of this was delivered in New York, probably in 1896. This is before he encountered the Throops, and certainly long before, in relative terms, before the California Institute of Technology was formed. Beyond this, the research of physical science could not then reach. But the inquiry does not stop in consequence. We have not yet found that one by which knowing everything else will be known. We have not yet found that one by knowing which everything else will be known. We have resolved this whole universe into two components, into what are called matter and energy, or what the ancient philosophers of India called Akasha and Prana. Now, as we know, matter has very fine forms indeed. Modern physics has identified aspects of matter that exist for literally billionths of a second. They come into existence and vanish in a nanosecond. But they are the building blocks, somehow, of what we experience in its grosser forms. So matter is not, just the table, the cup, the liquid in the cup, the gases that are arising from the cup as the liquid evaporates. All of that's very gross. There are much, much finer forms. But the generalization is matter and energy. And the ancients called this Akasha and Prana. The next step is to resolve this Akasha and Prana into their origin. Both can be resolved into the still higher energy, which is called mind. It is out of mind, the Mahat, the universally existing thought power, that those two have been produced. By mind, it is not meant the mind that exists as chitta, mind stuff, within this stardust spacesuit. That's a reflection of mind. He's talking now about the cosmic mind, the universally existing thought power that these two have been, from which these two have been produced. Thought is a still finer manifestation of being than either Akasha or Prana. It is thought that it is thought that splits itself into these two. In Sanskrit, there are three bijas that express this. Om, Oing, Hring. Om is that cosmic thought power. Oing is Akasha. Hring is the final. These three, these are not words, these are Shabda Brahman, Brahman in the form of sound that expresses these. So these are called seed words. Om is that cosmic thought power, that Mahat. Oing is the akasha. Hring is the energy or prana. It splits into these two. So many mantras that evoke these powers start Om Oing Hring. These powers are represented by vibration. This is very subtle vibration that has arisen in the intuition, in the depths of meditation, to the seers. And so this is how it is expressed in a way that transforms, these mantras transform the very fiber of our stardust spacesuit. The chitta is transformed by those vibrations. Any comments or questions about any of that? Okay.
And maybe I can add a comment now.
Yes, please, Roberto.
I'd just like to say that I think it's brilliant, the thought of Akasha, Prana, and Mahat. And I think it's brilliant because Einstein came later and said E equals mc squared. E energy, M mass, speed of light. Akasha could be is like the mass in the equation. Prana is like energy, and Mahat is the mind, a very mysterious thing, just like light in this universe. We have no idea about the mind, and we have no idea about light, really. And so the Swamis realized this, who knows, thousands of years ago. And of course, it was always true, but it took until the 19th century for Einstein to really come up with the particulars about it. But it was true all along, and I think it's just brilliant how they knew.
Well,
That was
they
my only
knew.
comment.
Thank you, Roberto. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is brilliant. And how did they know it? It was not left mind reasoning. It was, which is how we come to this way of expressing things in this really very elegant language of mathematics, E equals mc squared. So much, as you just said, is said in that tiny little equation. And it's so elegant. Nevertheless, it is a language of the left mind. These seers, these rishis, heard, so to speak, what they came to express in these terms, Sanskrit terms, Akasha, Prana, Mahat. It said that this is Shruti. This is something heard from that cosmic mind itself. And so then they translated that into the language of their time, which was Sanskrit. And they came up with these terms and expressed it. And as you said, it is brilliant. But you know, it's interesting. These characters took no credit for it any more than Einstein took credit for what he propounded. He said, it is the gift of fantasy. I have been given this great gift of fantasy. And so he allowed his mind to fantasize how these things might happen, which then he expressed in the left mind language of mathematics. But he also, according to him, intuited the mechanism. It's very interesting to study the life of Einstein and see what it is that he said was actually happening. And of course, Vivekananda told Tesla in, I don't know, probably 1896, 1897, something like that. When he was in New York, he told Tesla You have the knowledge that energy and matter are the same. Do the mathematics and prove it. Well, Tesla was busy with his own researches and never got to it. But it's interesting to note that because of a relationship he had with Einstein's wife, he told her of the conversation that he had had with Vivekananda. And whether there's any connection between that and what happened with Albert Einstein, who knows? But it's almost beyond imagination that she didn't read that letter from Nikola Tesla to Einstein. That letter from Nikola Tesla to her and read it to Einstein. Thank you, Roberto. Leave me alone, I'll ramble on for hours. Anything else from anyone before we move on?
Curious as to the contents of what Nikola Tesla said about Vivekananda. Do you know what he said at all?
He just related the conversation and that Vivekananda had. You can find this in the biography of Nikola Tesla. You can find the content of the letter. But he simply related the conversation along with a number of other things. He was very interested himself in energy as it represented itself as electricity. And so that was the focus of his researches. And so he didn't take time to do what Vivekananda asked him to do. But you can find the content of, there are some really wonderful biographies of Nikola Tesla out there. And you can find the content of that letter. And at least one of them, that's where I heard about that.
Yes, because I would think that Vivekananda, with his intuitiveness, would have recognized Tesla's kind of creative nature and say,
"Oh, he and Tesla were great friends.
Yeah, I believe
He was absolutely enamored of the demonstrations that Tesla would do to him about the properties of electricity. I don't want to go there because I'll start off on another ramble, but they were close friends, and Swamiji Vivekananda, of course, understood fully this. The fact that matter and energy were one and the same thing, a form of, I just loved what Roberto said, a form of light, a form of thought. So, yes, that's it. So, how it actually worked out, you can read it in Tesla's biography. So, thought is a still finer manifestation of being than either akasha or prana. It is thought that splits itself into these two. The universal thought existed in the beginning, and that manifested, changed, evolved itself into these two, akasha and prana, and by combination of these two, the whole universe has been produced. So now we have akasha, prana, and the source of akasha and prana, which is Mahat, the cosmic mind, the cosmic thinker. And of course, that's a very clumsy way to say it. But nevertheless, that's. So the universal thought existed in the beginning, and that manifested, changed, evolved itself into these two, akasha and prana, and by the combination of these two, E equals mc squared, the combination of these two, the whole universe has been produced. So if there's nothing else, now the Swami is going to take a pivot into the psychology behind all this. So is there anything else about this Akasha Prana Mahat that anyone would like to discuss?
I would like to ask you, and I hear so many people that are interested in metaphysics.
Yes.
They always talk about the Akashic record that they can do on a person. That, as you said, and this is, you know, for example, if somebody reads the Akashic record today, probably next year won't be the same because the person is evolving. The mind, you know, is evolving and, you know, have more knowledge and advance, you know. We never been stuck. We tend to evolve according to what we do, what we learn in spirituality, in our daily life. So it won't be the same, the Akashic record that was read 1 year before and now. It's totally different because the person changed.
That's one point of view, Maria. That's one point of view. Another point of view says that the Akashic record is and Patanjali describes this in chapter 3 of the Yoga Sutras, that someone who develops the psychic power to do so can read the Akashic record, and the Akashic record, they can tell the past, the present, and the future of someone. Now, does it change? There are two schools of thought about. One, for good reasons, as you just described, says yes. Another says no, that it's fixed. And so the arguments and their resolution, I'll just say, that is above my paycheck. I really don't know enough about that to comment. I only know that there are these 2 points of view, and pundits who will argue vehemently and knock one another's turbans off in the heated discussion of whether the Akashic record is
Change or evolve.
Is fixed or is not fixed.
Yeah.
Can be evolved. So Vivekananda is apparently of the opinion that, well, I'll go off on another ramble. No, let's not go there. Let the Swami speak for himself, as Roberto said. But thank you, Maria. You're right. The Akashic record is a very precise term for those who use it well, and there are 2 very strong points of view about it. They almost parallel Newtonian physics and quantum physics, I would say.
Okay.
That is, Newtonian physics is deterministic. If you know how the machine works, you can predict exactly what's going to happen as a result of the machine working. The other is the quantum idea that the universe is probabilistic. That the quantum physicist David Bohm expressed this as infinite potential. So, as I say, there are strong arguments on both sides, and I don't know them well enough to talk about them in plain English.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Maria, thank you for bringing that up. Anything else from anyone before we go on to what the Swami has to say about psychology? All right. We next come to psychology. I am looking at you. The external sensations are brought to me by the eyes. They are carried by the sensory nerves to the brain. The eyes are not the organs of vision. They are but the external instruments, because if the real organ behind that which carries the sensation to the brain is destroyed, I may have 20 eyes, yet I cannot see you. The picture on the retina may be as complete as possible, yet I shall not see you. In other words, if there's an interruption in the nerves that carry the image from the retina to the real sensory organ in the brain, if there's an interruption in those nerves, you won't see well. If the organ inside the brain is destroyed, you won't see at all. So that's what the Swami is saying. The picture on the retina may be as complete as possible, yet I shall not see you if the organ of perception, which is in the brain, is somehow not functioning. Therefore, the organ is different from its instruments. Behind the instruments, the eyes, there must be the organ. So it is with all the sensations. The nose is not the sense of smell, it is but the instrument, and behind it is the organ. With every sense we have, there is first the external instrument in the physical body. Beyond that, in the same physical body, there is the organ, yet these are not sufficient. Suppose I am talking to you and you are not listening to me with close attention. Something happens. Say a bell rings. You will not perhaps, and you are listening to me. Suppose I am talking to you and you are listening to me with close attention. Something happens. Say a bell rings. You will not perhaps hear the bell ring. The pulsations of that sound came to your ears, struck the, tympanum, the eardrum. The impression was carried by the nerve into the brain. In the whole process, if the whole process was complete, up to carrying the impulse to the brain, why did you not hear? Something else was wanting. The mind was not attached to the organ. Now this is such a critically important idea about the psychology of how this manifestation occurs, how the apparent occurs as a superimposition on the real. Something else was wanting. The mind was not attached to the organ. When the mind detaches itself from the organ may bring any news to it, but the mind will not receive it. When it attaches itself to the organ, then then alone is it possible for the mind to receive the news. Yeah, by the reason for the difficulty in reading is there is a difficulty with the receptor instrument in this eye, which is the only one that works. It's called macular degeneration, and so I'm having trouble sometimes discerning, particularly late in the day, what it is that I'm reading. It is impossible for the mind to receive the news, yet even that does not complete the whole. The instruments may bring the sensation from outside, the organs may carry it inside, the mind may attach itself to the organ, and yet the perception may not be complete. One more factor is necessary. There must be a reaction within. With this reaction comes knowledge. With this reaction comes knowledge. That which is outside seems, as it were, the current of news sends, as it were, the current of news into my brain. My mind takes it up and presents it to the intellect, which grasps it in reflection to the pre-received impressions. Relation, not reflection. Presents it to the mind, which groups it in relation to the pre-received impressions and sends a current of reaction. And with that reaction comes perception. In other words, we have to have something if something completely novel happens in our sensorium, we will not recognize it. When the West first came to Japan, when Westerners first came to Japan and said words that have R in it, like word, the Japanese did not hear the R. They had there was nothing in their language that had the sound of R in it. And so this is why they were mocked for mispronouncing words that had R in it. They said something like return for return, or what am I trying to say? Anyway, they were mocked for, and the mockery was completely ignorant. It was an ignorant and inauspicious mockery because the Japanese couldn't help it. They had no R in their language. They were not hearing it. So that's what I meant. If something novel comes into your sensorium, how much is happening around us that we have no prior knowledge of, no name or form in our mind? How much is happening around us that we have no prior name or form for? So we do not sense it. We do not recognize it. That's really an interesting thought to ponder. Only when we have that pre-impression, pre-received impression, called a samskara in Sanskrit, only when we have that samskara, that prior mental impression, then the intellect sends a current of reaction. And with that, the reaction becomes perception. Anything at all, because the Swami is going to develop this thought, so we have to be on solid ground here. Anything at all from anyone about this process of the instruments, the sense organs, the sense instruments, taking the information in from the outside. It's always in the form of vibration, turns this vibration into whatever it turns it into, given its capacities. It presents it to the sense organ within the brain, actually within the whole body. The mind stuff is through our whole body. this is, by that I mean, there's something called the phantom limb phenomenon. You may have a limb cut off, and it will seem to you as if that limb is still there. So then the organ, the sense organ, presents it to the mind, which sends it to the intellect. Then the intellect, having compared it to its pre-existing store of names and forms, samskaras, says, oh yes, this is that. And perception occurs. So anything at all from anyone?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
Yeah, just making a comment / observation. When you were talking about the Japanese, because they did not have the word R, the letter R, and the rest of the stuff, children, as they are learning language, often mispronounce letters, and their words sound kind of almost funny sometimes. Up to a point, people laugh. But if they continue to do that after a certain age, then they are labeled as speech impaired and given speech therapy and things like that to conform with what is supposed to be the right pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yes.
just wanted to sort of bring that up.
All that is there, and this is even more tragic when it comes to a right brain dominant child who doesn't see things in a left brain dominant way and is told they're wrong. They mustn't be so dreamy and imaginative and so preoccupied with their inner reality. And so they're given harsh instruction, harsh what's wrong with you kind of thinking, and even drugs to make them to conform. So I certainly hear what you're saying, Swayam. Yes, the proper term, I said the sound of R. The Japanese did not have the phoneme. The technical term is phoneme. They did not have the phoneme for R in their language. They had to learn it. Now the Japanese who learn how to speak English, they can say all the words with R in it just fine. I defy any of us to quickly learn to pronounce Japanese correctly because we do not have that. We do not have the samskaras.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Anything? Thank you, Swayam. Okay. My mind takes it up and presents it to the intellect, this stimulation, which groups it in relation to pre-received impressions and sends a current of reaction, and with that reaction comes perception. Here then is the will, the state of mind which reacts is called buddhi. The state of mind which reacts is called buddhi, the intellect. Yet even this does not complete the whole. One step more is required. Suppose here is a camera and there is a sheet of cloth. Suppose here is a camera and there is a sheet of cloth, and I try to throw a picture on this sheet. What am I to do? Am I to guide what am I to do? I am to guide various rays of light through the camera to fall on the sheet and become grouped there. Something is necessary to have the picture thrown upon which does not move. This is, again, we're getting to the real key psychology here. What am I to do? I am to guide various rays of light through the camera to fall upon the sheet and become grouped there. Something is necessary to have the picture thrown upon. Something is necessary to have the picture thrown upon which does not move. I cannot form a picture upon something that is moving. That something must be stationary because the rays of light which I throw on it are moving, and these moving rays of light must be gathered, united, coordinated, and completed upon something which is stationary. Similar is the case with the sensations which these organs of ours are carrying inside and presenting to the mind, and which the mind is in turn is presenting to the intellect, the buddhi. This process will not be complete unless there is something permanent in the background upon which this picture, as it were, may be formed, upon which we may unify all these different impressions. What is it that gives unity to that changing whole of our being? What is it that keeps up the identity of the moving thing moment after moment? What is it upon which all our different impressions are pieced together, upon which the pre-perceptions, as it were, come together, reside, and form a united whole? We have found that to serve this end, there must be something, and we also see that that something must be relatively to the body and mind motionless. The sheet of cloth upon which the camera throws the picture is relatively to the rays of light motionless. Else there will be no picture. That is to say, the perceiver must be an individual, this something upon which the mind is painting all these pictures, this something upon which our sensations carried by the mind and the intellect are placed and grouped and formed into a unity, is what we call the soul of a man. So behind this intellect, all of this activity, organs and so on, is the soul of a human being. Now, before we go on to the Swami's definition of the soul, are there any comments or questions about this process as he has described it? Any concerns that need to be resolved? Okay. We have seen that it is the universal cosmic mind that splits itself into the Akasha and Prana, and beyond mind we have found the soul in us. In the universe, behind the universal mind, there
Brother
is
Shankara,
yes, dear.
sorry to interrupt again, but are you going to do the class till 9? I thought you were going to do 7:30 to 8:30.
Oh, what time is
I
it?
don't want you to get tired. It's 8:45.
Oh, is it 8:45? Well, that's what I told you. I'll ramble on and on. So we'll leave it at that. We'll start again. We have seen that this universal cosmic mind is okay. Thank you, Swami. And I do need to break off. You're right. I need to get in bed earlier. That's why I moved the classes back. And so thank you for being concerned. Any final thought or question from anyone? We don't have to stop dead in our tracks here. If there's anything that needs to be resolved or said.
I just want to make one comment, Brother Shankara. I think Swami got us through a snake road to get to the soul, the God within us. I think that's where he's getting us through the snake road. I felt like it was we were like traveling on a snake road, going round and round and round and so many things, and then come to intellect and then the soul.
Yes, well,
It was very interesting, very interesting.
he was talking to Westerners.
Yeah.
Whom these are not. He was talking to New Yorkers, very skeptical, very rationalistic seekers. They were seekers, otherwise they wouldn't have been with him.
Exactly.
But they were skeptical. They were very rationalistic, and he needed to make things very explicit for them.
Clear. Yeah.
So
very interesting.
That's why this, as you called it, Snake Road.
Yes.
Thank you, dear.
It took us on a path to get to the soul.
Well, if he'd have jumped right to the soul, he would have lost him entirely.
That is true. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone? And Swayam, again, thank you dearly for interrupting and noting what time it was.
It comes with being in that profession, Brother Shankara.
Okay.
Always telling children you have to go to bed on time.
Well, tell this child. So yes, thank you. I don't feel scolded. I feel loved. So anything else from anyone?
Thank you, Brother Shankar. Thank you.
Well, very good, dears. So until next week, where we'll continue with chapter 15. And then there is one chapter beyond this. This is a long chapter. This is a longish talk. And then there's one beyond it called the conclusion. So we have a little ways to go yet before we finish with Swamiji's Jnana Yoga. At which point we'll take up Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace, which you can purchase online easily if you want to get a copy. It's only 83 pages long, very short read. But boy, howdy, you talk about action-packed. So that's just looking forward, as the Swami says, we're always looking forward. So, Om Hari Om, Om Asato Ma Satkamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityor Ma Amrutangamaya, Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of endless noise and relentless delusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So the next opportunity for us to be together will be Saturday, where we'll discuss Swami Prabhavananda's How to Know God. And then on Sunday, there will be a celebration of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. His actual birthday falls tomorrow, the lunar calendar birthday, but so that we can all be together, we'll gather on Sunday at 11 a.m. And there'll be a short talk on the phenomenon of Sri Ramakrishna. And then there'll be some readings. If any of you would like to contribute a reading, please restrict it to no more than 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, something in that, and something about Sri Ramakrishna or his direct disciples, and the phenomenon as it existed that way. And then when all that is finished, we'll do a short, informal, not tantric, informal worship of the Master. Our pujari, our beloved Aditya Chaturvedi, is in India, and so we'll do it ourselves with certainly sincere and heartfelt worship of the Master. It just won't be tantric. So, with that, good night, everyone. And again, Swayam, thank you for your loving attention.
Hope you have a wonderful night's rest, Brother Shankara.
Thank you, dear. I do too. Last night's was not so good.